Hello everyone and welcome to the Dreamy Life Bakery YouTube channel. Today is going to be our first ever episode of Dreamy Life Bakes, and we're going to be making something I think you're really going to enjoy. And that thing is French macarons, so get ready. The ingredients that you're going to need for this bake are 1 cup of almond flour, 1 3/4 cups of powdered sugar, 3 egg whites, a pinch of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/4 cup granulated sugar, 1/4 teaspoon each of vanilla and almond extract, and 3 to 4 drops of gel food coloring. So the first thing you're going to want to do is blend your powdered sugar and almond flour together using a food processor. To get these ingredients together and measured, you're actually going to want to spoon both the powdered sugar and the almond flour into your measuring cups. You do not want to pack those ingredients. So I know traditionally you do pack powdered sugar, but you do not do that in this case. So blend it up. If you don't have a food processor, you could use a blender instead, and just blend it until it's nice and combined. Your next step is to sift this mixture just one time using a sifter. If you don't have a food processor or a blender, you could actually skip that first step and go right into using your sifter to blend the ingredients. And instead of doing that one time, you'll want to do it 3 to 4 times. The point of both of these steps is to get your dry ingredients nice and fine and thin, and that'll allow you to have a nice, thin, delicate, melt in your mouth macaron shell that is just to die for. Another good reason to use a sifter for your dry ingredients is to get out any larger pieces of almond that might be present in your almond flour. Those can cause, again, just bumps in your shell that you wouldn't normally want to see within your cookie. So again, this is me just sifting that mixture just one time. And then set that aside when you're done. And from there, we'll get started on working on our meringue, which is one of the more fun parts of making macaron cookies. So we'll start off with 3 aged egg whites. What aged means is that it has sat out for a period of time before using them. If you didn't do a lot of preparation, that could be just a couple hours, but you could age them for up to 2 days. Then you'll want to add a pinch of salt. Always be sure to pour it in your hand first so you don't put too much into your eggs. And then from there, we will add the cream of tartar. And you will need just 1/4 teaspoon cream of tartar to add to your eggs. What the cream of tartar does is allow for your meringue to be a little bit more stable. It's not a necessary ingredient, but it is very handy on days where it's very humid or if it's raining. It's never going to hurt your meringue. It's only going to help make it more stable. So I always use it every time I make a macaron. And then you're going to want to blend this at a speed of around 2 to 4 until it gets nice and foamy and frothy. So I sped up the time a little bit so you didn't have to wait with me. But as you can see, it's not fully white yet, still a little yellow, but it's nice and frothy and has a lot of bubbles in it. So we're going to add our granulated sugar now. And that's 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. And you'll want to add it relatively slowly. This helps to ensure your meringue stays stable and forms better. When I first started making macarons, I would pour it all in at once. To be honest, I don't think I noticed a difference, but once I read to pour it in slowly, I did start doing that, so haven't changed my ways. So next, what you'll do is you'll continue to check your meringue as it's blending, and once it hits soft peaks, you add your flavoring and your color. So as you can see, it's gotten nice and white. It's starting to get shiny, which is good. And I'll want to check it now just to see how it's looking. So this, as you can see when I pull it up, is honestly probably a little bit before soft peak stage. However, it's still holding its own, it's getting thicker, and I think it'll be able to support adding flavor. So you want to wait to add that liquid flavoring until you know you have at least some supportive meringue, or you could ruin that whole process and break it and not form a good one. So I add a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract and a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. And here you really could play up the flavor a lot, and you add really any extract that you want to change the flavor of your cookie. You can also use powder ingredients like cocoa powder to change the flavor, but I would add those flavors with your dry ingredients at the beginning step when they were sifted together. Now it's time to add the color. I stopped the mixer just because I was worried that it was getting over whipped, which is something you don't want to do with a meringue for macarons. So I will stop it periodically if I'm in a step that takes a little bit longer. So here I am adding gel food coloring in fuchsia and violet. You want to do either a gel or a powder food coloring because liquid food coloring can alter the consistency of your meringue and you might not be able to get stiff peaks with it. I find Americolor to be a really good brand of gel food coloring. You only have to add a couple drops to get really vibrant colors, and that's important with macarons because it can be hard to get colors to show up within them. So the right kind of dye is very crucial. So then you'll whip this mixture until you get just right at stiff peaks. You do not want to go any further once it's hit stiff peaks. An over-whipped meringue can lead to cracked or hollow macaron shells. So here I'm kind of testing it. As you can see, you see a stiff peak right there on the meringue. When I stir it, it kind of brings it more together and you'll see it actually might be in between a medium peak and a stiff peak. But that's where I like to have it. I don't want to over whip it at all, but it does look thick enough where it'll be able to hold its own. All right, so our next step here is to mix our dry ingredients that we had set aside into the meringue that we just created. So to do that, you'll start off by just pouring half of that dry ingredients into your meringue bowl and very gently fold it in. You want to be sure not to disturb the meringue, so doing the method where you swipe the side of the bowl, push down in the middle gently, will help make sure you don't destroy your meringue. Once that's fully incorporated, add your second half, and then continue that folding in process until that is put in, and then we'll really get into the steps of macaronage. Macaronage is a technique to fold in your batter to get the proper consistency to make a macaron. So what you do is you swipe the edges like we did before, but this time instead of pushing down in the center, you actually rub the batter onto the sides of your bowls. And what this does is help get air bubbles out of the batter. So again, you just continue the method, swipe the side, rub it on the edges, and you do this until it gets a lava-like consistency. And you can also check, which I do this every time, with a figure 8 or an infinity symbol drawn out with your batter. If the batter doesn't break when you draw your figure 8, then you know your batter is good to go. If it does break, you need to keep mixing. And that looks good. Our next step is preparing our piping bag for the macaron piping. So I have put a piping bag into a bowl fitted with a round piping tip, and you just pour your batter in as much as you would like to fit. As you can see, this is a good example of how it's like got that slow lava-like consistency. It's not too thin where there's no control over it, but it's not so thick that it holds its place completely. And now you'll want to prepare your tray to pipe your cookies onto. You could use either a silicone mat or parchment paper. I prefer parchment paper, and the way I get it to stick is I take some of my batter from the cookies and I actually put it directly onto the tray, and it serves as like a glue that's going to hold my parchment paper nice and snug onto the tray so that my macarons can keep their shape. And now it's time to pipe. So depending on the size of your baking tray, you might have to prepare a couple trays. But here's my first one I'll show you. What you do is you pick up your piping bag and pipe down in straight lines. You could draw your circles on with pencil onto your parchment paper on the bottom side before you do it to keep it even and neat. I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore. And then I do pipe these into about 1 inch in diameter rounds. Nice, even, straight lines. And then immediately after you pipe those onto the tray, you're going to want to get the air bubbles out. You don't want to have them sit or else they're going to start to dry. The way you get air bubbles out is you smack that tray as hard as you can onto the counter. And you'll want to smack it pretty hard on there to get the bubbles out, and you'll start to see them rise up to the top as you smack it down. Then what I do is I take a toothpick and I pop any remaining air bubbles that I see lingering towards the tops of my cookies to make sure they are all out and gone before they bake. Your next step is to add sprinkles if you're interested, and then you'll let your macarons sit at room temperature for about an hour to dry. Drying is very important because that's how you get your feet on your macarons. So here's the sprinkles I chose. I'm just going to put those on there. And then after I put the sprinkles on, I let them sit in front of a dehumidifier, and that does help dry them out a little bit quicker, especially in the summer months. Dehumidifiers help a lot to dry your macarons out. Next, you'll want to check your cookies to make sure they're dry. That will ensure that they rise up and get those feet, and then you'll bake them for 12 to 15 minutes at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. In order to tell that your cookies are dry and ready to go in the oven, they're going to look dull. And when you touch them with your finger, you'll be able to brush your finger across without making any snags. Finally, you'll remove them from the oven and let them cool. A way to know that your macaron is done cooking is you'll grab it, wiggle the top. If it wiggles, it's not done. It needs to bake longer. You actually want your macarons to be quite hard out of the oven. They also should peel off your mat without sticking, just like that. Your final step is to match that macaron with a twin, which means finding the cookie that's the same size and shape as the other one, and then adding your filling. So I chose to use a buttercream that I'm going to pipe circles around the edges, and then I'm going to fill those circles in with a chocolate raspberry filling. You don't want to put your frosting too close to the edge because when you smash them down like a little sandwich, this filling's going to spread out and get to the edges. Just smash them all together and make your cookies. Then the last step is to put them into an airtight container, put them in the refrigerator, and leave them in there for 24 hours before you enjoy. This will allow your hard cookie to absorb the moisture from your filling, and it'll allow to have that crunchy top with a nice, chewy, melt-in-your-mouth center that's just divine. Here's what they'll look like. This was before I had put them in the fridge for 24 hours, so as you can see, they're kind of slipping a little bit, but when they are done, they won't be as fragile. There you have it. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Instagram at Dreamy Life Bakery, as well as dreamylifebakery.com. This has been a Dreamy Life Bakery production. Happy baking!